And we now have Dr. Gilbert Doctorow joining us live from Brussels. He is an international affairs analyst, author and historian. Dr. Gilbert Doctorow, thanks very much indeed for joining us on the show. I want to begin by saying that there is a lot of misinformation out there to sift through. There are always going to be two narratives, two stories, but now it seems the gap is unbridgeable. The scale of the violence is unprecedented. What happens next, according to you? Children, babies have been killed in Israel, while Gaza has been cut off. There's no food, there's no water supplies. This is a massive humanitarian crisis on both sides.
This is a massive military crisis on both sides. I'd like to point out that by the nature of news cycles, by the nature of major global news providers like CNN, like BBC, like yourselves, the humanitarian side of this disaster is easier to comprehend and easier to present on the screen. The military side tends to be more abstract, experts speaking about the various military capabilities of this or that group in the Middle East, and it is less attractive and receives less television time. However, both sides of the story are equally important, and in emphasizing these horrible massacres, which you are correct about, you are in fact, not you, the station WION, but the news industry is playing into the hands of Hamas, because these massacres, these atrocities were not committed by angry Muslim youth. They were committed by hardened soldiers who were acting clearly under instructions to do what they have done for military purposes. The military purpose here is to draw the Israeli army into a lair, into a trap, which is what Gaza will be during a ground invasion. Okay. Mr. Netanyahu is under great pressure from the public everywhere to do that.
Right. Okay, I take your point there that this is not just a humanitarian crisis, but a military one as well. And then, therefore, the question being, can this become a full-scale regional war? Israel's northern front has been hit by missiles from the Hezbollah. Syria, Turkey is at odds with the U.S. about sending a carrier ship. How do you see this panning out?
Well, I think you have identified the most important local regional factor, and that is Hezbollah and Lebanon. So far, the exchange across the border between Israel and Hezbollah and Lebanon has been very modest, only symbolic. There are estimates that Hezbollah has 100,000 missiles that it can fire against Israel. This is when the supreme religious leader of Iran spoke on television yesterday, saying that the West underestimates the capabilities, the skills, the dedication of Palestinians. He was right on target. The issue is that Hamas has allies in the region, the most important of which, the most powerful of which, is Hezbollah. So if Israel goes into Gaza and commits the acts that it is now prepared to do, which will be massive destruction, the loss of perhaps thousands of lives among the Israeli Defense Force, and the loss of lives, one factor, 10 times more perhaps, among Gaza civilians, then that will regionalize the war. Mm-hmm. That will bring in volunteers from Syria, from Iraq, from Yemen, all under the instructions and training of Hezbollah. And then you have a real threat to the existence of Israel.
Right. Well, that's not a pretty picture at all. Where do you think the West is coming in? The U.S. is deploying weapon systems, but at the same time, the U.S. Secretary of State, Antoni Blinken, is on his way to Israel. It says, they say it's an attempt to find some middle ground, a possible ceasefire. But given the situation, is that even possible?
It is possible if it's not done by the United States alone. If the United States believes that it can monopolize the solution finding to this problem, then we will have an unmitigated disaster. There are other states in the region, including Egypt, including Turkey. There is, at some distance, Russia, who are all interested in finding a diplomatic and peaceful solution to this, not just the United States. The position that President Putin said on television yesterday is that his country stands for implementation of the United Nations resolutions on the creation of a two-state outcome in Palestine, Israeli and Palestinian. There are other countries in the region which are equally interested in such an outcome. They have to get together among themselves and not fight with one another over who has the lead role or the only role in finding a solution.
Right. But the stakes are really high here for the Netanyahu government that is under immense pressure, both by the domestic voters on one side, but the hardline factions in its own government on the way forward. You say that a ceasefire is possible if there are outside foreign countries and other stakeholders in this, but domestically, is there an appetite for that at all?
You have to leave Israel with no choice. It isn't a question of what Israel would like. Israel's very existence will be put in question if it follows the line that Mr. Netanyahu is now about to take, under pressure from the public in Israel and the world over the atrocities. If he goes in and does massive destruction in Gaza, it will regionalize the conflict, and he and Israel will lose control of the situation. So the best solution for all the parties is indeed a ceasefire now before things get totally out of hand. And a ceasefire would be best put in place by the major powers getting together. And I add China to the list, not by the United States acting on its own as global leader.
Right, not by US alone. Of course, there are regional factors, regional players in this, and also Russia and China are wanting to have a stake in this negotiation as well. And given the fact that Hamas, in some reports, has indicated that they are willing to talk now, that they have found a way into this war, and on the winning side, at least by some, in some narratives. Dr. Gilbert Doctorow, pleasure talking to you. Thanks very much indeed for joining us.
Thanks for the invitation.